So there's a couple of things I want to talk about. I just finished the Wormwood documentary on Netflix, and I want to just kind of draw this out. So on the one hand, we have the vector of compulsiveness, and this having to do with trauma and pain, and on that level of compulsiveness, that's something that I don't have direct control over. What I do have control over is what I do with that compulsiveness. Now, this compulsiveness has increased maybe 400% is the current rate over when all of this began. So in that sense, it's what to do with it. So I wake up with dreams, I wake up with ideas. A lot of the times I wake up with ideas that take half a second to a minute to conceive, and then take another 30 minutes to a day to think about. What I mean is, I've gone through this idea cycle enough to know what it's going to take out of me. In other words, this is not a cheap idea. It looks like a cheap idea, meaning it looks like it will provide some nice relief from all of this, and that, it took half a second to conceive, so let's just do it. And the idea is to get it done with, to get it out of my system. And then I can look back at a mixed set of data that says, on the one hand, I've got a lot out of my system. On the other hand, and I'm kind of creating a record for other people. On the other hand, I'm often not there for my girlfriend because I'm busy getting these things out of my system. And dreadful is it? Like even this is so fucking crazy. I get a fucking idea to express a fucking idea. Meaning, I'm not talking about doing the thing. I'm just talking about expressing it. I'm trying to draw a rainbow here, and I can't even open a pen. It's just like this endless thing. Now, this leads into violence because, like, here I am wrestling with a pen to communicate the idea of an idea. Why? Because it's so fucking lonely to be, I relate to the sun there in the Woodward picture. It's so fucking lonely to know and have no one else know. And this, I think, is the real horror of abusive trauma that is dishonored. There's no sense, where it's like the price is unbearably high for me. And in a place of fear and cowardice, the response by the high facilitators, it doesn't come close to honoring that, and it adds salt to the wound every time there's every time there's, like last time I wrote to Jason, I'm giving them an opportunity to take a stand, if not for me, then for their participants, and really for their organization. to bring in the most knowledgeable experts they can find on ethics, trauma, and business, because they have hurt their business. They have violated therapeutic ethics right and left, and they have caused immeasurable trauma. And if I proceed to the natural case to fight them in court, there will probably be no high. So I'm giving them a grace. And it's hard enough just to talk with them. There's so much pain in the space that just to talk with them, I become more violent, more angry. Why? Because it's a cover for hurt. Because it's hard enough for American men and American boys to express despair, to express loneliness, to express grief, to express desperate need, to express, helplessness. But it's even harder to do it to those who have betrayed us. And it's even harder when the initial wave of emotion and grief that came up for me at age 10, 11, 12, as this was surfacing with my father, was so systematically humiliated, disowned, etc., that you can see the end result of that play in him dying after listening to a 45-minute recording in which I detail many of the most horrific aspects of the way he hurt all 5 of the children. And he dies saying, not "I'm sorry," not "I understand what you mean," not "you're absolutely right," not "I understand why you feel that way." No, he dies leaving me alone, as he has always done, by saying, "Thank you for your nice letter. Let's just ignore that there was anything unpleasant about it. And then let's ignore it even further. Let's ignore the impact and everything. And let's not just leave it as I love you and I've always loved you, because that would be a little bit of a stretch to why we got 3 suicidal children out of 5, and everyone at varying degrees of compulsiveness. But I love you unconditionally. Let's take it the next step into insanity. And then let's leave you hanging there, like I'm going to die, off I go. And let's leave you hanging there so that you can either take the bait and then figure out in a crazed mind, how beating and lying and dissociation and trauma and rage and da-da-da is love, let alone unconditional love. But you can have the coin, the fake currency, the bit of paper, the symbol of love, not the real love. Or you can reject what you want more than anything else, which is love, real love. You can reject that and feel like, maybe I could have taken it. And it's me that's rejecting it. Like this is the sickest game in this arena, in my opinion. Let's trash, betray, abuse, blah, 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 blah. So anyway, that's, these are the places that people get hooked. And these are the doorways into possible dissociation, insanity, etc. And I get more sane, meaning I get to understand them. But I'm in a cult that doesn't want to see, meaning it's just invisible. I'm if we look down here, I'm in probably hour number 30 of this whole journey of my life, in which I'm exploring chauvinistic influences through time-space, loneliness through time-space, rebellion and contrarian moves that paid off handsomely in time-space, successes in time-space. I'm basically trying to create a more three-dimensional object of life, and using graphical tools. And I've been drawn to what Terence McKenna has talked about, how language needs to evolve from a verbal thing, to this problem I have where I see something, in 30 seconds, in a quarter of a second. I see it, and I see all these connections, and they're suggestive. It's like, wow, there's a lot of connections lining up here. Like when I asked Ann Watts, I said, an apology is really important. And she said, I don't think that's going to happen. And I said, I don't get it. It's like there's 30 lineups all leading to an apology. What's the lineup not leading to it? And a lack of apology doesn't make this go away. It pushes me closer to a sense where I've got to prove that this happened, because they're in such denial of the most basic things. It doesn't quiet it down, like to beat a child and say this is unconditional love. See, either that child is going to grow up beating their children unconditionally, lovingly, and feel like that's fine, and they're going to resolve the insanity that way. They'll just define unconditional love as beating people, or they're going to say this doesn't make any sense, and it's going to fuel. It's kind of like the sand in the oyster that you form this big thing around. And so, in that lines, one of the difficulties that I've been kind of playing around with in different ways is all the dimensionalities, all the facets of one object. And so my idea for this kind of rainbow image is, this is the object, since 1993. High has been involved in a pattern of subverting, masking, obfuscating, denying, relabeling abuses, love, etc., and looking the other way. And that's hurt a lot of people. And now they're in a more intense object, because that coming out would seemingly hurt High. Really, it just hurts their egos. It helps High enormously to know this stuff. And so, so my idea today, which again, half a second to capture it, 5 to 10 minutes to enjoy, the possibilities is, we're looking at new languages of communication, and this, going back to Terence, transitioning from verbal language, which takes 5 hours to communicate a few seconds of images, to image language through imagery. And we're not there yet, that we can kind of lace through and slice and dice the various paradigms and dimensions in communication. But I had this kind of just sense of a timeline of rainbow colors, and each color, having to sacrifice to our current left brain fixation with sounds of things that represent the things, rather than seeing the things directly and and more connectedly, that we have this rainbow color of things like integration, and then in what? To mission, to ethics, to decent human practices, value, that everything honor, integrity with this, integrity with that, good therapeutic practices, so that we can see how the same events take place on numerous levels. It's like on the level of friendship, this and this is happening for these and these and these reasons. On the level of diagnosis or not diagnosis, this is happening. On the level of legal practices and illegality, this is happening on the level of into me you see versus into me you don't see. This is happening on the areas of hypocrisy. This is happening on the areas of healthy service. This is happening on the areas of being truly loving. This is happening on the areas of calling abused love. This is happening. And that you can kind of see on these different planes, because that's how I experience it. And that's one of the reasons it's so confusing about it, is on one track, things are moving along very nicely. On another track, things are going downhill fast, but that's out of view. In other words, it's an invisible thing, and this ties in with one of my theories in culture, is that culture is so narrow by definition that it's got kind of the same V. But if you zoom the light in and you're part of this culture, you've kind of ignored and blockaded out all the rest of the psyche and self that doesn't fit in. On the other hand, if you're this culture, you've blockaded and ignored out, some of the way the other things fit in. And if you're in here, it's different. And so there's really, culture is itself, by definition, an exclusion of a great deal of what we are. And you could almost say that culture is the wound in which we awaken to the pain of what's been cut off and cut out. And from that source of pain, if we honor it rather than just anesthetize it with endless sugar, drugs, compulsions, lies, sex and the like, we actually can follow the thread of pain back to what was cut off at the time we accepted that this is what it's like to be an American man, as opposed to everything else. That the time we accepted we are a man and not a woman, at the time we accepted that we are this line and not this line, that what is cut off creates pain, separation from and longing for that which we were before. And in this, in this whole thing, we can kind of take our slice. And there's certainly some cultures, like Buddhism in Thailand, embraces Muslims, embraces Christians. And Thailand is an amazing country of curiosity around the rest of the world. And yet, so you could say it's much better than being a fundamentalist Christian, where you're with us or you're evil and going to burn in hell. You're with us or you're in another interesting journey. It's still, cutting off. It's not as hard defined. I think that's where we get into more dangerous. The harder, more defined culture tend to be, both in more cold Western climates and also more sociopathic towards feminine, in part to survive, 3-foot snowstorms and that kind of thing. And so I have this idea of an object, in the ideal sense, it would have imagery, not just words, but imagery that kind of goes through it. And so this, we're looking at maybe software development, and I'm actually working on, that's one of another project, so then there's the app software to create the timeline where you can speed it up, skip to create the dimensionality of an object and express it, so that you can say, sexually this is a 10, philosophically this is ambiguous, emotionally this is terrifying, and mentally it's very high on this level, very low on this level, and religiously this is horror, this is, it's perversion, blah, 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 and you can track it, and you can see what we're kind of illustrating here with this cultural tension, which is that, what is perfect 10, amazing, exemplary of a very narrow culture, is also perfect 10 genocide of the parts of ourselves that are being denied in a given cultural framework. It's the perfect sociopathic business deal, for example. Everything is, runs perfectly smoothly. You maximize the return on investment, you make the sale, you secure the downside, you do all this stuff, you walk away with your 100 million from the deal. That perfect, flawless execution is also perfect sociopathic behavior for another part of the self. That we may be playing a role in one part of our psyche, but that the extreme yeses over here, the perfect American, is the horrendous Thai, or is the, there have been 10,000 cultures throughout history. So I think I think the concern comes in when we see something in its upside. Like, for example, when I went to high, one of my driving motivations as a 28-year-old man who had never explored my sexuality with sex as being kind of particularly relevant, meaning my first girlfriend was 58 years old, plump, not very arousing to me, and that was completely irrelevant. I wanted someone interested in growth that had time, and she was interested in growth, she had time, and even more importantly, she was interested in me. And she had experience with over 100 lovers before, and so she'd even taken some high workshops. And so I thought, if I want to learn and the ropes and grow in relationships for a couple of years, this is perfect. We had a great relationship for 2 years. And then I left when the growth tapered off, when some of her shadow of fear, her shadow was showing up as every time I was really magnificent, she would sabotage it because she felt insecure. And we actually talked about it. She felt insecure that if I was really magnificent, I would never stay with an older, plump woman I wasn't terribly sexually attracted to. And so she had to jettison and sabotage every expression of greatness that was there. And eventually, because I had no interest in sex at the time, and was not, but the fact that I hadn't explored it, and I was getting fed up as hell that every time I expressed greatness, I was being chopped off right and left, and it was perfectly obvious. And it's like, I'm not going to leave you for some, bimbo with pert breasts, but I'm not going to stay with you. If every time I stumble into some part of my greatness or work my way into that part and I'm enjoying that gold that I've mined, you cut me down, because it's kind of self-fulfilling. I wasn't going to leave you, but I am, because you can't give up the addiction of cutting me down. I want to grow. I want to be magnificent. I don't want to be cut down. And so I left to do high. And in that, and so high was magnificent. As one of the reasons I left is like, since I can't be supported to be magnificent by the woman I love, sexy or not, let me explore what sex is about. And it was absolutely stunning. You know, I've had 30 amazing sexual partners with, you know, met at high. And so you could see like an off the charts escalation, you know, in what variety, intensity, exploration, all of that. So that's going up, you know, high. But at the same time, trauma is getting off the charts. My first 3 high partners, extreme trauma, dissociation, panic, shame, grief, jealousy, heartbreak. And high did not prepare me in the slightest to deal with that, or to prevent it, or to name it. And so we see, you know, 10 in sexual variety and 10 in inducing trauma without dealing with it. And so you could say, you know, highest slice of the culture, if you want sexual variety, is, you know, I was the perfect high participant. But at the same time, I was betraying and not knowing how to listen to my body. My body would get back spasms the day before the workshop, which I now associate with terror. Terror I wasn't conscious of, and which no workshop and no facilitator helped me get conscious of. And so you see this tension, and part of what I'm rebelling against is the narrow dimensionality of it all. You know, I think that to have real choice, we need to know the price we're paying and what we're betraying, and we need to know the gift we're receiving and the value that has to us. And we need to know it's always there. You know, I'm here in Thailand with my beloved, and I'm paying $30,000 a month to be here. The house is sitting empty. Business is being turned away. You know, and there's different reasons for that. My government will not let my girlfriend come and visit me. So if I want to have the connectedness of a heart able to connect with me in this level of trauma, I have to be here. The cost, $30,000 a month. I'm willing to pay that as long as I can. Meaning, when I run out of money, I can't pay it. But to me, that seems like a good deal, but it's not a blind deal. And, you know, and so I have a passion for bringing more of this to light. Obviously, I'm not making any money with these videos. I'm spending it. You know, I'm paying my assistant who helps me with business stuff to explore all this as much as possible. Because, why? I know all about being a great businessman. I've made millions of dollars being a great businessman. But I don't know how to be a great trauma communicator. So I'm growing that, you know, and I'm giving up, you know, the other. There's a price to be paid, and it's worth it to me. What I don't like in the Wormwood video, so this is, you know, I'm taking what? We're at 29 minutes to talk about the 10-second idea, the narrative around this. Why? First of all, it's holographic, meaning this is not in the past. Until certain forces change, until the Human Awareness Institute and its facilitators change positions very concretely and with clear protocols and transparency towards these events, they perpetuate. They're not in the past, they're just latent, waiting to repeat, in the same way that when I didn't confront Peter in 1993, I set myself up for the worst catastrophe of my life. You know, when it happened 10 times worse, the same thing. And he denied it then, and he denied it now. And the denial takes on different shapes. We're not going to acknowledge it. We're not going to apologize. We're not going to talk about it. We're not going to publish it. We'll cut you off from the email address, but we love you. You know, it's like good old dad. Just throw in the love. So this is, you know, and then, you know, but when I watch the Wormwood documentary, and do check it out, I see he's spent his whole life there. And I really appreciate, you know, one of the reasons I'm documenting this is you can learn from my choices. I'm up at 2 a.m. making this because this is a part of me and I'm completely alone in these analyses. I watch Wormwood, a little bit over my girlfriend's head. I think, you know, gosh, what's his advice after spending 60 years trying to uncover the truth? His advice is focus more on your love in your life and don't lose yourself so much in proving some point just because it's traumatic. And, you know, his dad was murdered by the CIA when he was a few years old, and all, you know, it's just, wow, it's miserable. You know, that was his advice. I'm like, well, I agree with that. And is there a middle ground? And is anyone else going to learn from this? I don't know. You know, and this is part of what I want to emphasize is real loneliness in our style of relating. I don't know American men that want to talk about this. Seems like it's much more interesting to talk about than sports. But we're not raised that way. And I want to challenge that. Do I want the next generation to be saddled with the same kind of bullshit I've been saddled with? No. Who's going to change it? No one's ever changed it for me. You know, so if not me, who? You know, and so there's all this stuff. So I'm just sitting with this. I have no idea what, you know, what's the right thing to do or not, you know, this, that, the other. But I'd rather not be alone in knowing what not to do and this and that and the other. And so I'm including you in this snippet. All right, and time for bed.